Good afternoon. Hello, friends. Many of you have been waiting weeks for me to get to this. I have been too. I'm so excited. This is the 12th part of a book called Sunshine by I don't even know what I just said. Robin McKinley. Kitty! Hello, Kitty! How are you? I hope you're doing well. Wherever you are in the world, you are fantastic and wonderful, and I appreciate you. How is this book real? Here we go. The doe, I said. Yes, it would not have been right for you to remember the last day of a human woman. There was a laugh that stuck in my throat. No, I said soberly, it would not have been right for me. I sagged forward again, but this time I was leaning against his leg, my cheek just above his knee. How did she die? I said dreamily, resting against the leg of the vampire who had cured my poisoned wound with the death of a doe. How? He repeated. There was a long pause while I remembered the wild grass against my slender legs, the way my 4 hoofs dug into the ground as they took my weight as I ran, how much more fleetly and steadily I ran on 4 two-toed hoofs than I would ever run on 2 queerly inflexible, platter-like feet and thick, clumsy legs. He said, there are many myths about my kind. It is not true that we cannot feed unless we torment first. She died as any good hunter kills his prey, with one clean stroke. But, I said, groping for the answer I wanted, needed. You told me, long ago, by the lake, you have to ask. You can take no blood that is not offered. She has to have said yes. After a little while, he said, animals do not draw the distinction between life and death that humans do. If an animal is caught by age, by illness, by some creature stronger than it, and cannot escape, it accepts death. A longer pause. Also, my kind were all once human. There, perhaps, can be no truly clean death between one of your kind and one of mine. I thought, if that is true, then it works both ways. The death of the giggler at my hands is no cleaner than the death he was offering that girl. I shivered. I felt Constantine's hand on the back of my neck. I told you last time that Bo and I chose different ways of being what we are. You magic handlers know that you risk, with every sending, the recoil. Bo is burdened by many years of the recoil of the torment that provides the savor to his meals. The savor is real. Yes, I too have tasted it, but it is not worth the price. I was looking across the room, at a corner near the ceiling, where one of the occupied cobwebs hung. I could see the tiny dot that was the folded-up spider at the center. I raised my head and turned around, knelt up, put my hands on his knees, stared into his face, into his eyes. I looked full into his eyes briefly last night, while I held the knife. Before he had taken from me the action I could not perform. Oh, sorry, I have hiccups. No, don't start now. I think I'm fine. I stared at him now, minute after minute, night flowing past us as morning had done by the lake, 2 months and a lifetime ago, when I told him I would take him with me, through the daylight, out of the trap we shared. You used the blood of a doe to spare me the death of a human. You said you were not, turning me. Why are you not telling me not to look in your eyes? I have not turned you, he replied. In 3 hours, when the sun rises, you will find that sunshine is your element, as it has always been. I do not think you can be turned. You can be killed as any human can be, as the poison bow set in your flesh would at last have killed you, but I believe you cannot be turned. This is interesting. I'm going to drink some of sip my tea. There is nothing I could do to you with my gaze any more, whether I wish it or not. I was not able to give you the doe's cleanly. I caught and carried her blood for you, for tonight's necessary rite, but I am not a clean vessel. Sunshine, we are on territory neither of us knows. We are bound now, you to me as I already was to you, for I have saved your life tonight. As you saved my existence 2 months ago. I think the honors were about even. 2 months ago, I said, struggling. He picked my hands up off his knees and then held them between. He picked my hands up off his knees and held them between his hands. That which binds did not judge so. The scales did not rest in balance. You will begin now, I think, to read those lines of power, governance, sorcery, as I can read them tonight. No, read them. Stop. Period. There's a period there. But what has happened between us tonight? Onyx Blaze's daughter, the daughter who did what you did that second morning by the lake, always held that capacity. Now you must learn to use it. That which binds reckons I have been bound to you by what happened 2 months ago. I could not come to you if you did not call me, but if you called, I had to come. You are now bound to me as well. I did not do this deliberately. To save your life, it was the only choice I had, and I was bound to try. That's almost a pun. When I came to you 4 nights ago, I had no knowledge of the wound you still carried. I was thinking only of how I could convince you to go into battle with me. That I should succeed did not seem likely, though you were calling to ask me for help. I came here that night thinking how I might give you anything I could give you to help you in that battle, if you agreed. It would have required some greater tie between us, but nothing like, I do not know what I have given you tonight. Another silence. He added, I do not know what you have given me. The unknown element of this is so exciting, because they're both like in new territory. Another longer silence. Well, I said shakily, clinging to his hands, holding mine, I think I can see in the dark. Oh my God. Wait, is that the part 3? Oh my God. Part 3. So, I would have said that not much could be worse, short of being dead or undead, than those first weeks after the night I went out to the lake and met some vampires up close and personal. I would have said that being paralyzed from the neck down or having an inoperable brain tumor would be worse. Not a lot else. Just shows how limited the human imagination can be. The first weeks after Khan healed the wound on my breast were worst. Were worse? Why? Why? It's funny because I had thought, living through those first 2 months after the nights on the lake, that the great crisis was about what I was, or who I'd become, or what terrible thing was wrong with me and about to go wronger, and why all was changed as a result. But I was still struggling against the idea that all was changed. Sticking the giggler with the table knife should have shaken me out of this fantasy, even if the sucker sunshade trick hadn't. But I was too busy being grossed out by the sheer grisliness of the latter experience to have thought much about the philosophical implications. What the little chat with Jesse and Pat had revealed to me had done my head in worse, and the news that the suckers were on to conquer the world within the next century had been worse yet. I felt like a pancake in the hands of a maniac flipper. But when you're being carromed around your life like a squash ball, you haven't got leeway to think about what happens next. When you're feeding the second coachload of tourists that day, you aren't thinking about the birthday party for 50 next week. Maybe you should be, but you aren't. Now is more than enough. Before the detox night with Khan, I still thought I could say no somehow, could still stick my head back in the sand. Hey, I wasn't going to be around in 100 years, unless maybe I started handling a lot of magic, which I didn't want to, right? That was exactly what I didn't want to be doing. Magic handling, extending your lifespan was a myth anyway, so what did I care? You can be a really nasty, selfish little jerk when you're scared enough. I was scared enough. Of course, let me do that again. Of course, I had had this apparently permanent leaking wound on my breast. I had had these nightmares, and I had been doing a pretty bad job, after all, of suppressing thinking about what it all meant, what had happened at the lake. But I was still obstinately trying to pretend I'd only had a piece of very, very bad luck. I feel a hiccup starting again. Why are these happening during a video? And the fact of my having survived it wasn't irredeemable. My gran had shown me all that transmuting stuff 15 years ago, and I'd never used it before. Maybe it would be another 15 years before I used it again. Maybe 30 this time. And one vampire more or less? Who cares? And the table knife venture was just that the giggler had been the one who cut me, poisoned me. It was a one-off. It wasn't a one-off. You know it's not! There was an answer in there somewhere. It wasn't me. It wasn't my warped, screwed-up genetic heritage. And if I delivered the world of one sucker, sort of accidentally having preserved it in another one, then my final effect on the vampire population was nil, invisible, void, which was exactly the profile I'd choose. I told myself I had always been my father's daughter. I was facing what had been there, all the time. But I was also facing stuff that hadn't been there. Being able to see in the dark sounds great. Never trip over the bathroom threshold on your way for a pee at midnight again, right? But it's not that simple. Human eyes don't see in the dark. They don't have the rods and cones for it, or whatever. Therefore, you are doing something that isn't human. It's not like you've awakened a latent talent, like someone who finds out they have a gift for playing jazz piano after a life previously devoted to Bach. That may be odd, but it's within human scope. That is a brilliant analogy to explain this. Seeing in the dark isn't, and you know it. That doesn't mean I don't know how to explain. Let me do that again. That doesn't mean I know how to explain it. But trust me, you can tell the difference between seeing because there's enough light and seeing because something weird and vampire-y is going on in your brain that chooses to pretend to be happening in your eyes because that's the nearest equivalent. Like if some human had had a poisoned wound healed by some weird reciprocal swap with a phoenix, maybe they'd be able to fly afterward, apparently by flapping their arms. Mind you, no one has seen the phoenix in over 1,000 years, and it has never been inclined to do a humans any good turns. Rather the opposite. Phoenixes are in this world. Very like vampires, I suppose, except a lot of people think the phoenix is a myth, and not many are stupid enough to think vampires are. I think the phoenix has at least a 50-50 chance of being true because it's nasty. Oh, I love that. What this world doesn't have is the three wishes, go to the ball and meet your prince, happily ever after kind of magic. We have all the mangling and malevolent kinds. Who invented this system? I love Sunshine's thoughts so much. I saw in the dark pretty well. I thought, do I want to see Bo coming? Oh, yeah. And seeing in the dark doesn't mean when the sun goes down. It means all the shadows that fall in daylight. I just realized there was that scene where she said she saw the spider up in the corner, and that was the clue that she could see in the dark. Um, this would not be a big issue for a vampire, of course, but it troubled the hell out of me. Even an ordinary table knife throws a shadow, although I didn't really need any more reminders that table knives would never be ordinary to me again. It throws your balance off, seeing through shadows. Your depth perception goes wrong, like trying to look through someone else's glasses. Everything has funny dark light edges to it. Sometimes those edges have themselves thread-like red edges. You get your new looking through bad spectacles distortion on everything, including your own hands, your own body, the faces and bodies of the people you love and trust. Oh, the one time this goes away is when you look in a mirror, or it did with me, just in case I needed reminding that I got it from a vampire. Thanks. This narration is the best. I hated it that I just now saw more easily in the dark than I did in the light. In the dark, it all made sense. I hated this. I was so clumsy for the first 10 days or so that Charlie did another of his drifting into the bakery and closing the door numbers. Golly, twice in 2 weeks. I must be a worse pain in the butt than I realized. Damn. He wandered around the bakery for a minute, like he was thinking about what to say. I knew better. He figures this stuff out beforehand. But when I still lived with him and Mom and Mom, I used to see him ambling around the house in that fake idle way, figuring out what he was going to say to someone, and what they might say back. He thinks of it on the move and says it on the move. He wandered a lot during the time the city council was trying to upgrade us. The media, who love a good story, and truth is non-compulsory, presented Charlie's as the focus of the neighborhood campaign to stay the way we were, down market and crappy. This is not entirely false. That's when Charlie's kind of got on the new Arcadia map rather than merely the Old Town map, and one of the results was that Charlie could afford to build my bakery. I have to say, he used to wander a lot when Mom and I were at each other's throats, the worst too. There was some overlap between these two eras. Kenny and Billy are probably scarred for life. But having him wandering around again in that way I recognized made me feel bad. I didn't live with him anymore, but I had the impression he didn't wander as much as he had then, that he'd mostly figured out how to say the sort of things he needed to say as Charlie of Charlie's. I suppose a magic-handling baker with an affinity for vampires is kind of an unusual problem for a coffee house. Maybe that word factor was trivial. I don't say that word because I'm a dude, and that's fair. You've been having a little trouble lately, he said, mildly and gently, addressing one of the ovens. That oven is working fine, I said, thinking if you're going to manage me, you could just do it. He turned around. Sorry. Charlie's has had its rough times, but having softs interested in one of my staff is a new one. I refrained from pointing out that our regular softs had always sort of jived with me. I thought because I was the one who wanted to hear their stories, but as it turned out I now knew, because they remembered my father, even if Charlie, and for that matter Mom, and I, didn't. Yeah, I said. It blows. I've been thinking, okay, my dad has always been my dad, but that doesn't help. I could have gone on not knowing what it meant. Charlie hesitated. Well, I doubt it, Sunshine. If you just kept coffee hot, maybe, but someone who can... His voice faded. Have you talked to Sadie about it? I shook my head. Have I sawn myself in half with a blunt knife? No. Oh, God. You know what Sadie is like? No one better. You inherited her backbone, her doggedness. The difference between my mom and me, besides the fact that she is dead normal and I'm a magic-handling freak, is that she's the real thing. She may have a slight problem seeing other people's points of view, but she's honest about it. She's a brass-bound that word because she knows best. I'm a brass-bound that word because I don't want anyone getting close enough to know what a whiny little knot of naked nerve endings I really am. And a nasty temper, I said. Charlie smiled. She knew your dad pretty well. Do you know she loved him? She really did. Still does in her secret heart. Oh, she loves me, don't worry, and we're happy together. That's the point. She's happy running the admin side of Charlie's. And ripping self-important assholes to shreds, I thought. But get undercover if there haven't been any self-important assholes around lately. God, why do I have hiccups? This is the worst. The worst timing. She was often joyful, euphoric with your dad, especially at the beginning. But his wasn't a world she could live in. Mine is. My guess is she got out of your dad's world when she did and took you with her because she knew what you were. I think she knew you were going to be someone pretty unusual. I think she was hoping that what she's given you, both by being your mom and by raising you in a place like Charlie's, isn't going to be enough ballast, when what your father gave you started coming out. I'd already figured out that she hadn't included him in the bad crosswatch. So what I was in Charlie's version of events didn't include the possibility of a demon taint. On the whole, I thought my version was more plausible than Charlie's, possibly because it was more depressing. I drifted in a very Charlie-like manner over to the stool and sat down. I looked at my hands, which had a funny red outlined light dark edge, thought about bad gene crosses. I put my head in my hands and closed my eyes. "What do you think, Sunshine?" said Charlie. "Is it going to be enough?" "I don't know," I said. "Charlie, I don't know." This book, y'all, this book. August was less death-defying than usual in terms of temperature, which among other things meant that I hadn't had to beg Polly not to quit, if not in terms of numbers of Earth Trek coachloads, and possibly, because all the heat August hadn't used had to go somewhere, we went straight into Indian summer September. Do not pass go, do not collect 2,000 blanks. So I got out all my least decent little bit of nothing tank tops and wore them. The scar was visible, but the skin was flat and smooth, no puckering, and the white mark itself seemed weirdly old and sort of half worn away looking, the way old scars get sometimes. I was still having trouble with the idea that what had happened that night counted as healing, but whatever it was, it had worked. I started going home with Mel a lot. He was glad to have me around, glad to stop arguing about my going to another doctor. He didn't know about Khan, of course, but he knew plenty, too much, about recent events. He would know that I needed reassuring without knowing I needed to feel human. This is really stupid, but I also discovered that I somehow believed that he was the one human at Charlie's who might be able to stop me in time if my bad genes suddenly kicked in, and I picked up my electric cherry pitter and went for the nearest warm body. That he drowned me efficiently in a vat of pasta sauce while everyone else was standing around with their mouths open, wringing their hands and saying, "Who are we going to get to cover the bakery on such short notice?" I don't think they would say that immediately, but I know why she goes there. This was at its worst during Monday movie evenings. The set-on living room had never seemed so small or so packed with flimsy, vulnerable human bodies. If Mel didn't feel like going, I didn't go either. As a romantic fantasy, I don't think it's going to make it into the top 10. Most women pining for the presence of their lovers aren't worrying about about needing their homicidal tendencies foiled, but it did mean I felt a little safer with Mel around. I probably didn't believe it at all. I just didn't want to give him up. He was warm and breathing and had a heartbeat. Human. Yeah. I hadn't been willing to go see a specialist human doctor, as Mel had kept asking me to. No. I asked a vampire for help, and took it instantly when he offered it. Mel must have wondered what happened to the wound on my breast, but he didn't say anything. He was very good at not saying things. It had only been since the night of the table knife that I'd begun to wonder if his reticence was for my sake or his. Who knows? I don't even know. And if it was for his, no, I needed him to be steady, solid, secure. I needed it too badly to pursue that one. Too badly to wonder about the number of live tattoos he had, even for a motorcycle thug. Another of the things I'd never thought about was the way when we went home together it was always his home. He'd been inside my apartment a handful of times. If we had an afternoon together, we went hiking or went back to his place. If we had an evening together and we decided to go out, we went where he wanted to go because there wasn't anywhere I wanted to go. I knew his friends. He didn't know mine. His housewards were set to know me. Mine weren't sent to know him. I didn't have friends. I had the coffee house. A few librarians, chiefly Emile, who had been a Charlie's regular all her life, was as far afield as I went. I love that it's librarians. It is halfway true that if you're involved in a family coffee house, you don't have a life, but only halfway. Mel had a life. I've said before that Mel had been a bit of a hoodlum in his younger days, although nobody seemed to be quite sure how much, or maybe his war service had wiped earlier misdeeds off the record. He wasn't old now, but he'd had time to go wrong and then change his mind. There must have been signs he wasn't going wrong right, though, even at the time. Some of his tattoos were for pretty strange things. Some of them I didn't know the purpose of because when I'd ask, he'd say, and go silent. Like, what kind of tattoos? Now I want to know. Anybody who spent a lot of time on or about motorcycles would have a couple of the regulation anti-crushed by flying metal or running into trees at high speed wards. Oh my God, you could get wards for that. Either prickled into your skin or on a chain around your neck or a secret pocket in your belt or the soles of your biker boots. He had those, but he also had a seeing things clearly charm that I hadn't recognized when I saw it the first time. Okay, a useful thing for someone on the wrong side of the law, or the wrong side of the battle zone, who needs to have his eyes peeled for trouble. But Mel's wasn't the conventional block and warn ward that most petty crooks used for the purpose. Why? Huh. You could sometimes half identify the variety of malfeasance you were dealing with by whether or not you could see the ward. Scammers, of course, kept it well hidden. Wouldn't do to have it dangling on a bracelet or tattooed on your wrist when you popped your cuffs at someone you were trying to schmooze. A couple of Mel's old gang, who had also changed their minds about being professional bad guys, had it on the backs of their gonna punch you in the nose hands, so the guy who was about to get punched would see it on the fist being held under his nose. Anyway, Mel still bought and sold let me do this again. Anyway, Mel still bought and sold motorcycles. He still drank beer with friends at the night house with a jug, wives and steady girlfriends, very occasionally boyfriends. Yes! Yeah, I drink my tea. To very occasionally bisexual Mel. I mean, he's bisexual all the time, but that's not how it works. It's not like bisexual only at one point of the day. I just think of all the wonderful Tumblr memes about being bisexual, and it's so fucking funny to me. Because there's people who actually believe that shit, that you are only bisexual like this 1 hour of the day. Like it's a switch that you just turn on, and you're like, nope, now I'm back to being straight, or gay, or, oh, people are terrible. Anyway, very occasionally boyfriends. How exciting. We're expected to show up if they wanted to. Better yet, we were expected to talk. Of course, the women who could talk about ignition mixtures and piston resistance were preferred, but you can't have everything. He'd bought a house in what had been Chesterfield, but was now called Whiteout, the worst wars-hit section of New Arcadia, had it cleared and rewarded, and was slowly doing it over into something even my mother would recognize as habitable, even though the motorcycle refit garage and what had been the ground floor would probably have given her spasms. He loved cooking, and Charlie's... let me do that again. He loved cooking and Charlie's, but he wasn't owned by them. A very different life than the one she lives. I felt like maybe I should be asking to borrow his survival textbook. Maybe the problem was that the first chapters in it were about running away from home at 14 and lying about your age, and then being a biker bandit for a few years before deciding that the fact you always seem to wind up frying the sausages over the fire for everybody was maybe a pointer toward a different way of life with better retirement options, which 5 years of the wars had given him plenty of time to consider. He was in the wars for 5... Oh my God. Mel would have understood why I drove out to the lake that night. He probably did understand without my telling him. I would have liked hearing him understand, but I didn't want to tell him, because I couldn't tell him what happened after. But you don't have to talk when you're making love, and bodies have their own language. Also, you don't have to use your eyes so much. There are other things going on. Meanwhile, I was still reaching the wrong distance to pick up the edges of baking sheets and muffin tins, or the handles of spoons, and fumbling them when I managed to grab them at all. I walked into doors a little too often instead of through them. At least I knew the recipes I used all the time by heart and didn't have to bother peering at print mid-mix or identifying the lines of measuring jugs. Nor had I lost my sense of whether a batter or a dough wasn't going together right or not, or what to do if it wasn't. Which is relieving, but I do love that Robin McKinley is addressing these things. Like, if your sight changes because you can't see... Like, I can't even imagine not being able to see shadows like I do. Like, that's so weird. Oh, but I mean, I'm sure that... I wonder if that's a thing? Like an actual disability? I mean, I can't judge, like, super far distances because I have astigmatism. Anyway, just thoughts. The thoughts that are coming out. I do this. I could tell Jesse and Pat about seeing in the dark and let them tell me what to do about it, or with it. As far as my strange new talents went, it beat a hell out of unusual usages of table knives, and maybe if I told them I could bear to tell the people at Charlie's. Nobody had to know anything about why I could now see in the dark, including the dark of the day. One day, when Pat and John came in for hot-out-of-the-oven cinnamon rolls at about 6:32, I tipped them onto a plate myself and took them out, while Liz was still yawning over the coffee pot. You have some free time soon, maybe, I said, trying to sound casual in my turn. They both shifted in their seats, trying not to point like hunting dogs. Of course. Not very many people, even at Charlie's, are at their best at that hour, but it doesn't pay to be careless. And Mrs. Bielowski was there, pretending to read a newspaper while waiting for one of her Confederates to turn up to make a clandestine report. For you, Sunshine? Anything, said Pat. I'm off at 2, I said. Come around the shop, said Pat. There are 2 desks in the entry, okay? You up to the right-hand one and say Pat's expecting you, and they'll let you straight in. I nodded. Oh shit, this is exciting. There was a young woman at that desk with a nameplate and a sharp uniform and a sharp look, like she should have had a rank to go on the nameplate, but what do I know? She hit two buzzards. Buzzards? This is bound to happen. I've been fucking up reading all afternoon. Buzzers. There are not buzzards in this room, everyone. Buzzers. She hit two buzzers, one that opened the inner door and one that presumably warned Pat, because he came walking out to meet me before I'd gone very far down the faceless hallway. Mel must have brought me out of the last night of the giggler's existence on this earth, but it was so characterless, I was ready to believe I had crossed one of those distance-folding thresholds and was now on Mars. If so, Pat was there with me. Maybe we'd been on Mars that night, too. What if the wrong person showed up first and said you were expecting them, I said. I told them middling tall, skinny, weird-looking hair because it will have just been let out of being tied up in a scarf for working in a restaurant. You never comb it. Wearing a fierce look, said Pat. I was pretty safe. Fierce, I said. I also thought skinny, but I have my pride. That part about my hair is true. Yeah, fierce. Through here. And he opened the door and shepherded me through. This was, presumably, Pat's office. The chair behind the desk was empty, but had that push-back someone just got up look. Jessie was sitting on a chair to one side of the desk. Someone I want you to meet, Pat said, nodding toward the other person in the room who had stood up out of her chair and said in a rather stricken voice, Hi. What? Emil. Why is she there? I looked at her and she looked at me. With my funny vision, the sockets of her deep eyes and the hollows of her cheeks had a glittering dark periphery. Okay, I said, not planning not to lose my temper unless it was absolutely necessary. What are you doing here? Tea? Said Pat blandly. Tell me what Emil is doing here first, I said. Well, we're in a putting all our cards on the table vogue now, are we? Said Pat, still bland. Since the other night. So it's time you knew Emil is one of us. What the fuck? What the fuck? One of you, I said. Soph. And here I thought she was a librarian. Undercover Soph, Jessie said. Part-time, added Pat. I am a librarian, said Emil, but I'm sometimes a librarian for Soph, too. I thought about this. I'd known Emil since I was 7 and she was 9. She and her family had had Sunday breakfast at Charlie's most weeks for years. We were already regulars when Mom started working there, and then when I started hanging out there. She was one of the faces I recognized at my new school. I'd lost half a year being sick, and then Mom crammed the crap out of me the second half of the year, so I didn't lose a grade when I went back to school in the fall. Yes, I mean crammed. Second grade is freaking hard work when you're 7 or 8. In hindsight, that was the beginning of Charlie's being my entire life. I didn't have time to make friends the 6 months I was being crammed. The only kids I met were kids who came to Charlie's. Not that I got to know many of them because I wasn't allowed to annoy the customers. But Emil used to ask for me, so I was allowed to talk to her. She talked to me because she felt sorry for me. I was weedy and undersized and hangdog that half year and always doing homework. I forget how it started. Maybe she saw me sitting at the counter studying, which I was allowed to do when it wasn't too crowded. We'd managed to stay friends outside of school, although not inside so much. 2 years is the Grand Canyon when you're a kid. She'd gone off to library school my junior year and did an internship at the big downtown library the year after I started working full-time at Charlie's. And we used to get together to complain about how hard working for a living was. 2 years later, she got a job at the branch library near Charlie's. Sometimes she still had Sunday morning breakfast at Charlie's with her parents. When did you become undercover, part-time, or hanging upside down on a trapeze? I said. Stop it, Hiccups. Stop it. I did not sound friendly. I did not feel friendly. 20 months ago, she said quickly. I relaxed. Slightly. Okay, so why did you? Emil sighed. Seemed like a good idea at the time. She glanced at Pat and Jessie. I glanced at Pat and Jessie, too. If they looked any more bland and non-confrontational, they were going to dissolve into little puddles of glop. Emil looked back at me. You're not going to like this, she said. I know, I said. Soph monitors GlobeNet usage for who likes to read up a lot on the others, said Emil. That's how they found me. They have a note of everybody who subscribes to the Dark Line, which included both her and me. In theory, any heavy-duty line in the Cosworld will let you look up anything you like on the GlobeNet, and the parameters are drawn only by your subscription price and the weight of the line, which is fascinating, by the way, but in practice is a little more specific than that. The Dark Line is what you are going to choose if what you are chiefly interested in looking up, all the latest in the GlobeNet could give you on the others without going to a dark shop or the library or some other public hook in for it. If I'd ever given a passing real-world thought to anything outside my bakery, I would have known Soph must do stuff like monitor the Dark Line. Which would mean they would know I used it. That, with my dad, was easily enough to interest them in me. What now, though? What are they going to do? Oh, my God. If I'd ever given a passing real world thought to it, which I hadn't, I'd lived in my own swallowed up little world. I, who had been the star pupil in June Yanofsky's vampire lit class. But that was the point, really. The others were still something that happened between the covers of books like Vampire Tales and Other Eerie Matters. Soft shop talk overheard at Charlie's was just live stories. Dry guys happened, but never to anybody I knew. Vampires were out there, but nowhere near me. Until recently. Well, shit. Shit. We'd already found you, of course, Pat said to me, because of your dad. Oh, yes, I said. You could stop reminding me. Nothing wrong with your dad, is there? I said to Emil. Emil laughed a little bitterly and bowed her head. As her bangs fell across her forehead, they left flickering mahogany bars against her skin. I blinked. Nothing that I know of, or with my mom either. That's why it came as such a shock to them when I had 2 sets of adult teeth come in, one inside the other. What does that... Okay, so we're gonna... is this like confirmation of what type of weird? She is? Oh my God. Fortunately, my mom has a cousin who's a dentist. A discreet dentist. And scared to death there might be something wrong with his blood. Also, fortunately, my second set wasn't the kind that keeps growing, although they were a funny shape. Once they were out, they've stayed out. My mom's cousin doesn't have anything to do with our branch of the family anymore. But I'm not registered. Remember Azar? I was already remembering Azar. He'd been the year between Emil and me. My freshman year in high school, he was the only sophomore on the varsity football team. That was before his lower jaw began to drop and widen to hold a spectacular pair of tusks that started to grow up at the same time. What the hell? They took the tusks out, of course, but they couldn't do much reconstructive surgery on his face till his jaw stopped expanding. After the first surgery, his family left town so he could start school again somewhere they hadn't known him before. That was after he'd been registered. After our school had taken away all his sports awards because he was a parp lad and must have had, ipso facto, an unfair advantage. Which is crap. And he'd been a nice guy. He wasn't stupid or a bully. What part would you be to have tusks? It's an interesting situation, Pat interrupted, because one of Soft's official purposes is to find unregistered part bloods, register them, and find their asses good, if not arrest them, and throw them in jail, which happens sometimes too. One of Soft's unofficial purposes is to find certain kinds of unregistered part bloods, protect them from getting found out, and persuade them to work for us. We really like librarians. They tend to have tidy minds. She's a part... Oh my God! Kitty, this book is so much all of the time. There we go. Sunshine by Robert McKinley, so much all of the time. There you go. You're welcome. But seriously, thank you, Kitty, for supporting me and getting me to read this fantastic book. It continues to blow my mind. Continues to. Thank you.